He said it right there at the edge of the aisle, where the florist's petals were still fresh, and the champagne hadn't run out of excuses yet. Maybe it's fate we met again. And I laughed, because what else do you do when fate shows up in a tux that looks like it cost more than your rent for a year and says he remembers your name? Let me tell you how it really felt. The ballroom was one of those places where chandeliers look like constellations someone brought down to hang over rich people's tables. The string quartet played as if their bows were butter knives slicing through a wedding cake. Everyone had the posture of people who had never fought gravity, and Clara stood there in a borrowed dress with a zipper that had opinions, clutching a gift I couldn't afford, for a man who used to say I was his person, and who, at 4 p.m., on a Thursday in June, had decided to become someone else's. Deep breath. Hannah whispered in my ear, her hand warm on my elbow. She has this radar for when my lungs forget their job. We walk in, we sit in the back, we clap, we leave. That's it. The back, I echoed, as if the ocean had a back and you could just sit there, dry. I could see Andrew's mother from across the room, hair immovable, smile surgical, giving us that look that says, in a very gentle way, "Why are you here, dear?" Because I said I would be. Because I wanted to see what surviving felt like, up close. Because staying away would have meant I still believed I didn't belong. Clara. Hannah touched her phone with the economy of a surgeon. Last chance to bail. Nope, I swallowed. We're staying. I need to prove to myself I can do impossible things. Okay, she murmured, the way you murmur to a cliff jumper who hasn't noticed the rocks yet. We do impossible things. Got it. There's a rhythm to weddings, even the expensive ones. You arrive, you pretend you're not counting X's, you find your seat, you clap on time. I told myself to find the rhythm and ride it, but rhythms break when names get called that live in your bones. Watching Andrew at the end of the aisle felt like reading a book I used to know by heart, and realizing someone had rewritten the last chapter while I was asleep. He looked happy. That was the worst part. It's easier to be generous with someone who looks like they're being punished by their choices. But Andrew looked like a man who had chosen, decisively, to forget. He scanned the crowd with that polite glow people wear when they're hosting, and then his eyes slid over me, without sticking. Huh, Hannah said softly. Ghosted in real life. Oh, it's fine, I lied, and the string quartet chose that exact bar to break into something lyrical. Like my life had a soundtrack, and the composer was cruel. We found seats, back row, close to the exit. I kept my gaze on the altar and on the bride, who was honestly beautiful, in that effortless way money can sometimes be. I wanted to hate her. I couldn't. She looked kind. She looked like someone who practiced gratitude lists. The officiant started. Vows, laughter. A joke about meeting on the terrace at a charity gala. I felt something in my chest turn over and look for a way out. I was 25, broke in a poetic, inconvenient way. My family's bankruptcy, a bruise that kept blooming under my clothes. I'd wrapped my whole heart around work, because work was something you couldn't talk out of leaving you, and here I was, wearing my bravest face, watching a chapter close, and trying not to hate myself for still thinking the story had belonged to me. That's when I felt it, a change in the air, like the way a room recalibrates when someone important walks in. Heads turned. The quartet faltered, and then chose discretion. Even the chandeliers seemed to hold their breath. Peter Knight had arrived. You know the name, Knight Group. The man who could make or unmake a coastal skyline with a phone call and a coffee. The press calls him a visionary. The markets call him a certainty. Our little city calls him the one who never stays for dessert. He didn't belong at Andrew's wedding. But then again, Peter rarely asked permission to belong. He stood at the back for a second, letting the eyes find him, then did something unusual. He looked for someone. There's a difference. He wasn't just receiving attention. He was sending it like a searchlight. It landed on me. Of course, Hannah whispered, as if the universe had a sense of humor none of us deserved. Of course he knows you're here. I didn't move. Grim statues have been more expressive. Peter started down the side aisle, quiet, no scene, a gentleman's glide through a room that had recalibrated to his gravity. He stopped at our row, bent his head down, and in that undercurrent voice of his, the one built for private negotiations and unexpected mercy, said, "Is this seat taken?" Hannah blinked. I blinked. The seat was not taken, but the sentence was. Peter Knight sat next to me like it was the natural order of things, and it would have been funny if it hadn't been my life. The back row felt smaller. The stage felt closer. He didn't look at Andrew. He looked at me. "Hi," I said, because I am nothing if not capable of small talk while having an existential crisis. He smiled, and it reached his eyes the part that never made it to the profiles. "Hi. I didn't know you two were," I flicked my eyes to the altar. "Friends." "We're not," he said simply, "but you are a friend of the groom. Or you were, and since I couldn't catch you on the terrace before the music swallowed you, I had to improvise." A breath, a half shrug. "You know how much I love improvisation?" The officiant asked the bride to repeat after him. My pulse kept time with her syllables. I should have told him to leave. I should have told him this was not the time. But I didn't. Something about his face made the word "stay" in my mouth. Something like concern. Something like apology. And I didn't even know what he'd be apologizing for. "Clara," he said, using my name like it was permission. "I need 5 minutes. Not now. Not here. Afterwards, will you give me 5 minutes?" "Why?" It came out too fast. "What for?" "Because there's a project," he said. "Because there's a door that's opening and I don't want you to miss it. Because—" He stopped, like he'd reached the limit of what he could say under a chandelier. "Because I wish someone had cornered me at a wedding when I was 25 and told me the truth sooner. Their nose than oplocks." I should mention, Peter is not the kind of man who admits to wishing. The admission made the room tilt, slightly. "You picked a dramatic setting," I managed. He glanced at the altar. A brief, polite acknowledgement of someone else's happiness. It seemed appropriate. Turning points like to pretend they're shy. They're not. They love a crowd. "Peter," Hannah whispered over me, and it occurred to me that she was not immune to charm just because she was immune to nonsense. "Is this about South Bay?" His eyes flicked to her. Approval. "You must be Hannah." "Yes, South Bay Coastal Resort." The bid window just shifted. Early. Someone moved the clock. "We don't have time for people to get in their own way." "Why me?" I asked. I couldn't help it. "You have an army." "I have architects and accountants," he said. "I have people who make spreads and people who make speeches. What I don't have is someone who can stand in front of a room full of donors and city planners and cut through the rehearsed lines and make them remember what the ocean felt like when they were 8. He paused. "You have that." I would have rolled my eyes if a different part of my body hadn't gone perfectly still. He said it like he knew me, like he remembered a night on a pier I'd never told him about. People talk about talent like it's a sword. He made it sound like a compass. At the altar, the bride said, "I do," and the guests sighed the collective sigh of a story finding its end. I realized my hands were clasped so tight my fingers had blanched. "It's not a good time," I said. Obviously. Clearly. He didn't argue. But sometimes the door doesn't care. Applause rose like a tide, and we stood with everyone else, clapping for two people who had found each other in a world where people misplace themselves for less. I clapped, and something inside me let go, which is not the same as giving up. Beside me, Peter did not clap like a man happy to be seen clapping. He clapped like someone who understood ceremony. It was almost reverent. The recessionals started. The couple vanished into a tunnel of hands and cheers. The room loosened. Air returned. The bar, a silent prophet all ceremony long, found its congregation. 5 minutes, Peter said, and it wasn't a question anymore. It wasn't an order, but it had the kindness of one. Hannah's eyes in mine. Choice. "Take it or don't." I nodded. We filed out into the corridor that smelled like lilies and old money. The hotel's terrace opened onto a view of the bay you could mistake for a painting if your heart was in the right kind of pain. Peter steered us away from the hum of guests, toward a corner that still held the last of the afternoon's cool. "First," he said, "before anything else, I'm sorry." "For what?" I could hear my own defensiveness sit up straighter, the way a cat does when it's not sure if it wants to be petted or leave. "For not calling you back when you sent the email," he said. "I read it on a flight. I flagged it. The day ran me. That's not an excuse, it's a failure." He looked at me, and there was no PR in the look. "You deserved an answer." It was such a small kindness, so ruthlessly precise, that I had to look away at the water, which had never let me down. "Thank you. I meant what I said inside," he continued. "South Bay is moving. The board accelerated the timeline because they want to get in before the season. There's pressure to hand it to the usual suspects. But the pitch is wide open, if someone changes the conversation. And you think I could do that?" I said slowly. "I know you can," he replied. "I've seen you in rooms where people had already decided, and I watched them remember the part of themselves that doubts certainty." He smiled then, a brief flash. "You're inconvenient to inertia." Hannah coughed, which is what she does when someone says something too true in public. "What would it be exactly?" I asked. "My role. Lead narrative," he said. "You'll shape the story, why South Bay matters, who it serves, how it avoids becoming another glass monument to the few. You'll work with design, environmental impact, community stakeholders. You'll make sure they can hear each other, in words their mothers would recognize. You'll define the niche we own without selling our soul. It's messy, and it will demand both your heart and your temper, and you'll think I'm an idiot at least twice a week." "And the catch?" I said. "Because I was raised by a father who taught me to find the string under the gift wrap." "The catch is people who smile while they sharp their knives," he said evenly. "You'll be underestimated in loud ways and overestimated in quiet ones. Also, Andrew's people are in the short list." There it was. The air said, "Told you the ocean has a back, after all." "Of course they are," I whispered. "You don't have to do this," he added, softer. "You could take the week. Breathe. Call me when your hands stop shaking." I looked down. They were, in fact, shaking. Hannah touched my wrist. "We could also say yes now, and then you can shake while we work." A laugh escaped me, half sob. "That's your pep talk?" "It's my friendship," she said. "It's knowing that the thing that hurts is also the thing that keeps you from getting small." I thought of the altar. I thought of the vows. I thought of the way the bride's father looked at her like a man who had hoarded sunlight and was finally spending it. I thought of my mother, an accountant who could turn a ledger into a lullaby, and who taught me that numbers are just stories that forgot their manners. I thought of bankruptcy court, of boxes that ate our family pictures, of the day I decided that belonging wasn't something money got to arbitrate. I looked at Peter. "If I say yes, I pick the team." "Within reason," he said, "which is corporate for yes if you don't make me regret trusting you. You'll have final say on narrative. We'll disagree. That's healthy. But I won't let anyone sand you down." He self-captain's college and a deccio. "And if we lose, we'll lose honest," he said, "and we'll have said something I'm not ashamed of, which, for the record, is rarer than bids that win." The wind tilted, cool across my cheeks. Somewhere behind us, the DJ tested a microphone, and someone laughed the way people laugh when they're trying not to cry. "Okay," I said. He didn't move. "Okay?" "Yes," I said, and the word felt like standing up in a room where only sitting had ever been allowed. "I'll do it." He exhaled one of those barely visible releases men like him learn to hide. "Good. Then we start now. There's a prep brief I'll send. We have a working session at 10 tomorrow. I'll have you meet Samir design-led and May community liaison, and we need to walk the site before the week is out. Bring shoes you can ruin." "Romantic," Hannah muttered. "We're so in." Peter glanced at her, amused. I like you, Hannah. She grows on you, I said. Like moss. Or old grievances. Perfect, he said. We'll need both. A woman in a satin dress found us then, breathless with the politeness of someone sent on a mission. Mr. Knight, she said, relief tangible. The bride's mother was hoping you'd. I'll be right in, he said, then to me. Are you okay to handle a few minutes on your own? There's a thing I can't gracefully avoid. Riemandoft. I've had practice, I said, and it came out not bitter, just true. He nodded, and then impulsively, it seemed, which is a word you don't get to use with him often, he touched my shoulder. You didn't imagine it, he said. What? The part that hurts, he said. You didn't make it up. It happened. It matters. It doesn't get to tell the whole story. He left before I could answer. The terrace filled with the sound of a future I didn't recognize yet. I leaned on the railing and watched the bay pretend to be a mirror. You okay? Hannah asked. No, I said. And yes, I don't know. I said yes. You did, she said, approving. You said yes to the right thing. Is it? I asked. Or am I doing that thing where I double down on work because it's the only place I don't feel like a ghost? Clara, she said, gently, sometimes the only way to stop feeling like a ghost is to haunt the rooms that tried to forget you until they remember your name without the echo. Also, I want to meet May. I laughed, and some of the tightness in my chest loosened. You'll like her? I don't know her yet, she said. But anyone who liaisons with a community and still answers emails probably has a spine I can respect. We drifted back inside, where the reception had fully exhaled into being. People clustered around tall tables that made their legs look like they had a dress code. Andrew stood with his new wife, flanked by his best man, someone from the bank who had recently discovered adjectives, and his mother, whose smile had achieved a kind of weaponized peace. He saw me then. This time, his eyes didn't slide off. They caught, briefly. He looked startled, like he'd heard a word in a language he used to speak. Here we go, Hannah said. He stepped away from the cluster, as if pulled by a string only he could feel. The room noticed. Rooms like this always do. His face arranged itself into something manageable. He stopped a polite distance away. Clara, he said. You came. I said I would, I replied, and tried to make my mouth remember how to smile without charity. Thank you. He looked at Hannah. Hi, Hannah. Andrew, she said, as one would say traffic or humidity. How are you? He asked me, the way men ask when they're hoping you'll say fine so they can catalog you as solved. I'm okay, I said. You look happy. I am, he said, and then real feeling flickered, because real feelings don't like to be ignored. Clara, I wanted to call. I didn't know if... It's your wedding day, I said, saving him the self-justification. You don't have to perform closure. He winced, almost imperceptibly. I didn't mean to hurt you. I know, I said, and I did. Intentions are such polite things. Outcomes are louder. Are you... He lowered his voice. Conspiratorial in a way that used to make me want to share secrets. Are you here alone? No, Hannah said promptly. She's with me, and also with Peter Knight. Andrew's face did something interesting then. Peter? He's here? He is, I said. Apparently he loves improvisation. Huh. He glanced toward the bar, where power collected like loose change, and then back to me. South Bay? Maybe, I said. He nodded, as if that confirmed something private. Well, I hope it works out for you. For us, I corrected, and I didn't know till I said it that I meant it that way. If the city gets what it needs, we all win. My. No was taken the read. He looked like he wanted to argue about the math of that sentence, then thought better of it. His bride's hand found his sleeve. Her smile, gentle and direct, found me. I'm glad you came, she said to me. Her voice was clear. Andrew has told me about your courage. Has he? I said lightly. He has, she said. And I hope today is kind. It was the nicest thing she could have said. It was also devastating. Thank you, I said, and meant it. They moved on the ocean, doing what oceans do. I stood very still. Hannah stayed exactly where she had been, like a lighthouse with opinions. Okay, she said. Now we find carbs, and then we leave before your self-respect starts writing poetry. There's a cruise. We'd almost made it to the door when the room did that thing again, the recalibration, the hush around the nucleus of attention. Peter's voice carried not loud, but clear enough to find me. Clara, he called, and I turned. One more thing. He crossed the room in 5 steps that probably have their own zip code. He stopped half a breath away. Mindful in that way, men are only when they know what it costs to be careless. You said yes, he said. Confirmation nestled inside gratitude. I did. Good, he said. Then you'll need this. He slipped a folded sheet into my hand paper, not just a text. On the outside, in his precise pen, Bay Brief. Inside, I'd later discover the bones of the argument we'd spend weeks putting muscle on. Stakeholders, fault lines, the old maps people use when they're afraid of new water. Read it when you can, he added. And Clara, yes? Don't let anyone tell you this is a coincidence, he said, eyes steady. We get very few real intersections in a life. The rest is parallel lines pretending to be destiny. Is that your speech? Hannah asked. Or your flirting? Same muscle group, he said dryly. And that was the line that made me laugh, really laugh, for the first time that day. We left then. The hallway was quiet the way sanctuaries are after everyone has gone home. I held the brief like a talisman. The evening air outside tasted like salt and second chances. On the sidewalk, a girl in a yellow sundress was blowing bubbles for a toddler who thought she was a magician. The bubbles drifted, brief and dumbly beautiful, catching fat coins of light from the hotel's awning. One burst against my wrist and left a ring of damp that felt like a tiny crown. Okay, Hannah said, eyes on the sky. We working or we crying first? Both, I said. In rotations. Perfect, she said. I'll put it on the calendar. How one to bother. We walked toward my car, which had a new dent that I had not personally authorized, and as we did, I felt the peculiar steadiness that comes after the ship has turned and the new horizon is admitted into evidence. In a life where rooms had taught me to shrink, I had done something else. I had said yes to the door, and somewhere inside that ballroom, the man who used to be my future was learning how to be someone else's past with grace. At the curb, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it buzz, then looked. A text, brief and surgical, 10 a.m. Night group, 42nd floor. Bring shoes you can ruin. P. Underneath, another. Also bring the version of you that doesn't apologize for knowing what rooms need. She's the one I invited. Let me guess, Hannah said. He wants you to bring the shoes. He wants me to bring my spine, I said. Even better, she said. I know where you keep it. We got in. I put the brief on my lap, like a promise. The city unspooled ahead of us, neon pretending to be stars. I drove, steady, and as the night opened, I heard it the quiet click of something that had been locked for too long, opening from the inside. When I dropped Hannah off, she leaned back in, face lit by streetlight. Get some sleep, she ordered. Drink water. And don't reread old messages. He were not has decide from the quartz and 2 tern. I won't. I lied. She caught the lie, put a hand on my cheek anyway. One last thing. Yeah? When you walk into that 42nd floor tomorrow, walk like the view is yours. I nodded. She shut the door. I watched her go, small and ferocious and irreplaceable. Then I drove home to my apartment that still smelled like the lemon cleaner we used when we couldn't afford candles. I stood in the kitchen and drank water that had the good sense to be cold. I didn't reread old messages. I opened the brief. The first page was a map. Not the glossy kind, the kind developers put in slide decks to tell people how inevitable the future is. A sketch, hand-drawn lines showing currents and coves and the way wind can turn a straight road into a pilgrimage. There were notes in the margin in that precise hand. Here, old fishing pier memory anchor. Noise concerns designed for listening. Public access pathways must feel like invitations, not permissions. Niche, not luxury belonging. I traced the lines with my finger. I thought about the 8-year-old version of me who believed the ocean knew her name. I thought about being 25 and choosing the kind of work that puts you back together even when it asks for your blood. I closed the brief. I turned off the light. In the dark, I saw the terrace again. I heard his voice. Maybe it's fate we met again. Maybe, I whispered to the ceiling. Or maybe we just finally stopped pretending the lines don't intersect. Either way, the door was open. The elevator to the 42nd floor moved like a secret. Smooth and efficient, and a little too quiet for how fast your life can change between floors. I caught my reflection in the stainless panel and did a quick inventory. Hair behaving, blazer telling the truth. Eyes well, they were busy. I had the brief in my tote and shoes I didn't mind apologizing to later. The doors opened to light. Night group's lobby wasn't ostentatious. It was intentional. Long, clean sight lines. Plants that looked like they'd been coached on resilience. Art that didn't shout but made you stop anyway. A receptionist whose smile had the patience of a librarian and the discretion of a vault. "Clara," she said. "Good morning. They're ready for you." She handed me a badge that said guest in a font that didn't try to be a personality. Conference B, second left. I texted Hannah alive, entering the Lion's gentle, well-lit den, and pushed the door. Peter was already at the end of the table, sleeves rolled, the universal signal for, we are here to do actual work, not theater. 2 people flanked him. I guessed right before he even introduced them. "Clara," he said, standing. "This is Samir Design and May Community." Samir's handshake was warm and distracted, the way artists are when they're thinking in 3 dimensions while using only one hand. He had a notebook open to a page full of lines that could have been a building or a poem. May's handshake was grounded. She wore sneakers with a dress and looked like the kind of person who could de-escalate a town hall with a sentence and a snack. "Hi," I said. "I've been told I need shoes I can ruin." "Always," May said, approving. "Welcome to the Bay." Peter gestured to a chair. On the wall, a screen held a map of South Bay. The curve of the coastline, the existing boardwalk, the old fishing pier like a memory stub, neighborhoods that fed into the shoreline like tributaries, a couple of ugly lots that had been pretending to be something else for too long. "Ground rules," Peter said, voice even. "We're building a pitch that doesn't apologize for ambition and doesn't confuse ambition with greed. We will not sell a fantasy that breaks the people who live here. We will propose a resort that belongs, which is different from a resort that dominates. No optics decks. If a sentence only works because no one checks it in daylight, it dies." "Copy," Samir said, half smile. "We're doing truth. Truth that sings," I added. "Otherwise the board won't hear it over their own certainty." May slid a folder toward me. "Stakeholders," she said. "Inside, neighborhood associations, Fishermen's Guild, small businesses, 2 environmental groups with acronyms that could double as rock bands, a coalition of parents who wanted public access to feel like an open hand instead of a gate with friendly signage." "And opposition?" I asked. She nodded. 3 fronts. 1. Preservationists who think resort is code for erase. 2. Luxury developers who want to turn the shoreline into a currency exchange. 3. Political pressure from people whose donors like glass. "He's our time, and Andrew's firm?" The word tasted like pennies, but I said it. Peter didn't flinch. "They're on the short list. They'll bring a deck that can buy you dinner and then call you a cab. It'll be flawless. It will also forget the ocean is not a sales prop." I opened my notebook. "Then we anchor to memory, not just math. We lead with what already lives there. We define the niche not as exclusive but as inclusive done beautifully. We don't pitch a destination, we pitch a relationship. Samir looked up, interest bright. Say that again. Partnering with a place instead of extracting from it, I said. Design for listening. The board expects renderings that shine. Give them a boardwalk that breathes. Build in shade for grandparents who aren't buying cocktails. Give kids a place to get the salt on their hands without being shooed. Keep the sight lines to the water open. No privatizing horizons. May was nodding. Community hours for the pools. Local vendors prioritized in leasing. Affordable transit links to keep traffic from strangling nearby streets. And contracts written in plain language. Peter rested his chin on steepled fingers. That slight half-smile again, the one that says a plan is standing up inside his head. Good. We're walking the site at 2. Before that, we have an hour to sketch the spine. Clara, give us the story beats. Hedovisna. I took a breath. The room settled. Open with the pier, I said. Not as nostalgia, but as proof. This shoreline teaches people to belong to each other. Then define the problem. Current access is patchy. Experiences are siloed. Revenue flows out instead of circulating. Then the promise. A resort that acts like a commons with beauty, yes, and with boundaries that protect the bay. Then the how. Design choices that keep public pathways feeling like invitations. Materials that respect salt and wind. Stormwater systems that don't pretend climate is a rumor. Small business integration that isn't a photo op. And the money, Peter said. We can't give the board poetry without a pro forma. Halavno one. I'll speak theirs, I said. ROI that includes reputational capital, stability via community buy-in, decreased risk from environmental compliance done up front, premium value from a brand that stands for more than shine. We show them you don't have to pick between heart and margins. You design for both. Samir whistled softly. I like her. You'll like her more after 3 coffees, May said. She gets sharper. Peter checked his watch. Security flagged something this morning. Opposing teams have been sniffing around the permitting office. They're trying to accelerate the calendar further or box out public comment. Classic, May said, eyes narrowing. Cut the oxygen from the room and then claim the air was always thin. So we counter by widening the room, I said. Town hall before the board presentation. Not theater listening session that produces visible edits. Invite opposing voices with respect. Put the uncomfortable parts on the slide. Make it unignorable that we did the work. Risk, Peter said, testing. Riskier not to, I replied. If we hide, we inherit the backlash anyway, and we deserve it. He nodded once. Okay, logistics. May, book the community center. Samir, prep a lightweight boardwalk mock-up we can bring on wheels, let people touch the materials. Clara, script the flow. I want it human, precise, no fluff. Give the last word to the grandmother with the best story about the pier. Done, May said, thumbs already moving. Also, there's a fisherman named Luis who can make a town hall feel like a front porch. I'll call him. Samir flipped to a new page, pencil working like a metronome. Peter's phone buzzed. He glanced, face tightening a degree. Heads up, he said. Andrew's partner just posted a teaser. South Bay deserves vision, not sentiment. It's getting traction. I didn't look at the screen. I didn't have to. I could hear the voice behind a line like that, smooth and bored and smug. The tone of someone who thinks sentiment is a synonym for weak. Great, I said. Then we'll show them what vision looks like when it can look itself in the mirror. He studied me for a second, like he was assessing the structural integrity of my resolve. How's your pulse? Ambitious, I said. But on beat. He smiled with his eyes. Let's keep it there. We broke after an hour with assignments like marching orders. In the hallway, I texted Hannah, site walk at 2, town hall plan. Also, Andrew's team is already throwing shade. Then, bring snacks, the kind that taste like defiance. She replied immediately, On my way with almonds, sarcasm, and a legal pad. The sight was a different kind of beauty, up close, less postcard, more unfinished symphony. The old pier, weathered into dignity. The tide pulling lines in the sand like someone's handwriting. The lots, scarred and stubborn. A food truck selling empanadas under a tarp that had known storms and kept receipts. "Hey, May." A man, with a cap and a grin like sunrise, waved. "You brought new people." "Louise," she called back, beaming. "Meet Peter. Meet Samir. Meet Clara." He shook my hand with both of his, a habit from people who have learned the quickest way to build trust is to make you feel held for 3 seconds. "You're the story one," he said. "Good. This place has been telling stories long before any of you put it in a deck." "I'm here to listen first," I said. "Even better," he replied. "Come." He walked us to the edge where the pier met the stubbornness of the sea. "You see that?" He pointed to where kids jumped from a low ledge, squealing, fearless. "Don't take that away. You can fancy this place, okay? Make it safe, but don't make it scared." "I won't," I said, and meant it so hard my throat tightened. Peter watched me watch the water. "This is why you're here," he said quietly. "Not for the lines on the map. For the lines that don't want to be straight." We paced the boardwalk. Samir knelt to touch the planks, muttering about grain and weathering and the way salt ages things into honesty. May took notes between greet and hugs, the informal survey any spreadsheet would envy. Halfway down the pier, my phone buzzed Hannah. "Your favorite internet is doing what it does," she said when I picked up. "There's a thread. Clara shows up at X's wedding with night group savior complex. It's messy. Also, a photo of you on the terrace with Peter, captioned like a soap opera. My stomach did that minor acrobatics routine it reserves for petty public cruelty. Source? A lifestyle blogger who needs a nap and a hobby, she said. But the pixels travel. I stared out at the water that had outlived every rumor ever told about any of us. "Okay," I said. "We don't feed it." Waya, id, ezer. "Copy," Hannah said. "I also DM'd the only journalist who asks better questions than she writes headlines. If this becomes a thing, we give her the boring, responsible version. Starve the drama." I loved her. "Meet us by the empanadas?" "Already here," she said. "They taste like we will not be defeated." When I hung up, Peter was watching. "Problem? Noise," I said. "We ignore it unless it tries to cancel the part where we do the work." "Agreed," he said. "Though for the record, if anyone comes for you, they'll have to go through me first." "I know how to use my own voice," I said, not ungrateful, just true. "I'm counting on it," he replied, and the corner of his mouth lifted. By late afternoon, my notebook was a field of arrows and underlines. We'd identified the weak joints in our story and where the light could get in. We had a draft agenda for the town hall, a plan for translation services, and a short list of people who could make the room feel like a family reunion instead of a fight. As the sun tilted, we stood at the edge of the water one more time. Kids, different ones now, were daring each other in brave shouts. A couple took wedding photos, her veil wrestling the wind, his laughter domestic and grateful. "Tomorrow," Peter said, "we lock the spine. Day after, we bring in finance. Then we start rehearsing the parts no one claps for." "And Andrew's team?" I asked. "They'll try to frame us," he said. "They'll say we're selling feelings because we don't know how to do numbers. So, we bring numbers," I finished, "and we bring people who can make numbers feel like choices instead of threats." We started back toward the cars. May was fielding a call from someone at the city who speaks constraint like a second language. Samir was still sketching while walking, a magician's trick I pretended not to envy. My phone buzzed one more time. A message with no ID, just a sentence. "You don't have to use the past as gasoline." I stopped. The dock creaked. Somewhere, gulls were holding a meeting with no agenda. I typed back before I could second-guess the part of me that refuses to retreat. "I'm using it as light." There was no reply. "Didn't need one. Ready?" Peter asked, keys in hand. Yes, I said, and the word had gained weight since the last time I'd used it. Let's build the room where this city recognizes itself. He nodded once, decisive. Then tomorrow, we start teaching the board a new definition of vision. A car door slammed somewhere behind us, the sound of a chapter ending 2 blocks away. I didn't turn. I already knew how that book read. I was busy writing a new one. The boardroom rehearsal felt like theater without costumes. Fluorescent honesty, chairs that encouraged good posture and bad decisions, a table big enough to host a small coup. We'd blocked the agenda on the whiteboard in clean lines. Open, vertical bar, listen vertical bar, design vertical bar, money vertical bar. Guarantees vertical bar ask, because if you don't name the beats, someone else will name them for you, and then call your song off-key. Run it, Peter said, settling into the back row like a benevolent judge. Assume interruptions. Assume someone's bored before you start. Assume at least one person thinks the ocean is a branding exercise. I stood at the front with a stack of note cards I wouldn't look at. Samir flanked the screen with models that still smelled like sawdust. May had the stakeholder list open, with 3 columns marked voice, concern, commitment. Hannah had coffee, and almonds, and that expression she wears when she's prepared to triage my heartbeat. Good morning, I began, letting my voice find a human key. Before we talk about numbers, I want to talk about promise. This pier, I gestured to the first photo. A child, mid-jump into water like a dare, answered, didn't make anyone rich. It made us neighbors. Our proposal is simple. Build prosperity that feels like that. Samir stepped in, light, precise. We're proposing a boardwalk that breathes. Planks designed to flex with weather. Shaded alcoves built into the rhythm. Materials that don't pretend salt is a rumor. Stormwater systems that read the bay's mood and respond in kind. He touched the model and a section pivoted, revealing a cutaway storage for community vendors, lockers for public use, plumbing mapped like a subway. Infrastructure up front, not an apology later. May. You will hear 3 themes today, and then you'll hear them again from people who live here. 1. Access that feels like an invitation. 2. Jobs that outlast ribbon cuttings. 3. A relationship with this shoreline that still makes sense when it rains. I took it back. Our niche is not exclusivity. Our niche is belonging done beautifully. Peter lifted a hand, playing the part of question that will actually happen. But belonging doesn't price rooms. What's the RevPAR? What's the ADR? How are we not charity with nicer lighting? Thank you, I said, because my father taught me to thank the questions that reveal the room. Room rates benchmark at tier mid-plus in off-season, tier upper in peak. But the anchor of revenue is mixed use. Local vendor leases, event programming, concessions tied to community partnerships. By designing for public foot traffic, not just guests, we stabilize shoulder seasons. Community buy-in reduces volatility, and the brand lift from being the resort that didn't privatize the horizon translates directly to pricing power and occupancy. Reputation is not soft revenue, it's insulation. Hannah fake coughed. And the pro forma? I clicked. The slide wasn't gorgeous, it was clear. Capital expenditure lands here. We've front-loaded environmental compliance, which reduces both delay risk and long-tail legal exposure. Conservative assumptions on visitor growth, sensitivity analysis that includes storm events, because catastrophes don't care about your calendar. We profile 3 scenarios: baseline, surge, and restraint. In all 3, the returns are competitive. In surge, they're excellent. In restraint, they're respectable and sustainable. Peter, Dreyer. What about the narrative risk of prioritizing public pathways? Investors love velvet ropes. Investors love predictability, I said. The velvet rope is a short-term trick that buys anger disguised as scarcity. We're buying loyalty disguised as civic pride. It's harder to counterfeit. Silence. Not empty thinking. We ran 5 interruptions, 3 counter-arguments, One bad faith question disguised as an anecdote about parking. And then we ran the part that mattered most. Guarantees, May said, stepping forward. We are not asking you to take our word for it. We're setting metrics we'll publish quarterly. Public access hours delivered, percentage of local hires, vendor mix, small business retention, stormwater performance against design. You can hold us to it, in daylight, in numbers. Samir rolled the model closer to the table. And this isn't abstract. Come touch what we're proposing. The deck here? It drains in under a minute after heavy rain. The seating hides windbreaks you don't see in renderings. The shade structures borrow the language of fishing nets without stealing it. I closed with what I had learned to trust. I know there's a version of this project that looks good on a postcard and breaks the story of the bay. We're not doing that. We're building the place where a kid can still jump without being told to go away. That's not sentiment. That's strategy. Peter stood. Again at 2/3 speed, he said. Board members will interrupt, check phones, test you for sport. Don't take the bait. Answer the question they didn't dare ask. We did it again, and again. By the third run, my sentences had sanded themselves into something strong enough to be simple. By the fourth, Samir's hands and my words were a duet. By the fifth, May had tuned the stakeholder cadence until the room felt like it had a pulse. At noon, we took the elevator down to the street for air that wasn't conditioned. I let my shoulders drop, felt the ache you get when adrenaline realizes it's been overachieving. That was clean, Peter said. Not praise exactly, acknowledgement. I still tripped on the parking question, I said. It's okay to trip, Hannah said, handing me a bottle of water. We sell the recovery. May glanced at her phone, face tightening. Heads up, she said, which had become our unofficial prelude to plot point. Councilwoman Reyes wants to drop by the town hall tonight. Good news, she's influential. Less good, she hates surprise and loves evidence. Perfect, I said. We're bringing both. Samir nudged me. And Andrew's camp? She was Lehab. Posted a thread. Hannah answered, scrolling, about serious builders who don't turn hearings into feeling circles. They're testing a frame. Then we don't take it, I said. We do what we said. We let the room teach us, and we show our edits in public. If we look performative, we lose. If we look scared, we lose. If we look like we showed up to work, we're dangerous. Peter looked at me like I'd passed a class he didn't advertise. Town hall is at 6. Doors open at 5:30. Go home, change, eat something that isn't nervous. I went back to my apartment and did exactly one of those things. Hannah confiscated my phone for 20 minutes while I ate noodles that tasted like survival. I changed into what I call my I mean. This outfit, soft blazer, boots that could do field work and eye contact, and we drove. The community center smelled like waxed floors and 1,000 basketball games, rows of folding chairs, a dais that had seen petitions and prom decorations. May's team was already there with name tags and translation headsets and coffee that could defend itself. On the wall, a hand-drawn sign, South Bay, all of us. Luis arrived with a cooler and a grin. I brought empanadas, he said. Every good argument should have one you can eat afterwards. Bivouac or si wast. People trickled in. Parents with kids still sticky from after-school snacks. Retirees with immaculate notebooks. Small business owners with end-of-day faces. A man in a suit that didn't trust the chairs. College kids who wanted to save everything and were willing to learn how. A woman with paint on her hands and a laugh like a warm front. At 5:58, Councilwoman Reyes slipped in compact, observant, carrying the kind of presence that says, I've outlasted 5 storms and a scandal, and you're not my hardest hour. She nodded to May, glanced at the sign, and took a seat near the middle, like any other citizen who knows her vote weighs the same in a folding chair. May opened, not with a speech, with a welcome. You don't need me to tell you what this place is, she said. You're the ones who taught it to me. Tonight we listen first. If we leave with fewer words and more clarity, we did it right. She handed it to me. I felt the room the way you feel a dock under your feet give then hold. We're proposing a resort, I said, plain. That word carries baggage. Some of you have seen it used to lock gates. We're here with a different promise. Build beauty that acts like a commons. We'll show you what we think that means. You'll tell us what we missed. We'll edit in front of you. I didn't click the deck. Not yet. I pointed to the blank sheet of craft paper taped to the wall. First, 3 minutes. What do you love about this place that you don't trust developers to understand? The hands were shy for exactly 4 heartbeats. Then the flood. Shade, said a grandmother in a floral dress. A place to sit where the wind isn't rude. Jobs that don't disappear after the ribbon, said a man with paint under his nails. Don't price our kids out of the ice cream line, said a mother with 2 small faces pressed against her hip. Storm drains that don't pretend thunder is fiction, said a teenager who had bailed out his own hallway last season. Don't make the pier behave, said Luis, and the room laughed. I wrote until the paper looked like a manifesto, and my wrist asked for a union. Samir annotated with sketches a trellis here, a berm there, a note. Sound is also a design material. May kept a running list of commitments we could make tonight versus those we had to take back to engineers and lawyers who translate desire into constraints and back again. Only then did I show the slides. Only then did we talk numbers. Only then did we say pro forma out loud. Will there be valet? A small business owner asked, and the question was really about where cars go when cities forget feet. Short answer, limited, I said. Longer answer, we're designing drop-off flows that don't turn your street into a waiting room, partnering with transit to increase frequency on peak weekends, remote parking with shuttles during festivals, discounts for arriving by bus or bike or stubbornness. Councilwoman Reyes leaned forward, not unfriendly. What happens when your commitments get expensive? We budgeted for them, I said. Up front. If we didn't, we'd be asking you to fund our courage later. And when the board asks why you chose belonging over premium, she probed. I smiled a little, because it was the right question. We'll say we chose premium belonging. That access can be beautiful, that stewardship is a brand value, that you can charge more for a stay that doesn't make people feel complicit. She sat back, considering. Not sold, not dismissive, engaged. Halfway through, the door at the back opened and Andrew walked in. He didn't make a scene. He made a presence. Enough heads turned for the room to notice the gravity shift. He stood against the wall, hands folded. The expression that used to precede long debates at my kitchen table, back when rent was cheap and certainty was cheaper. May didn't skip a beat. That's her magic. She lets moments arrive without letting them hijack. Last section, she said. What we'll publish quarterly and where you can yell at us if we miss. We laid out the dashboard. We laid out the email. We laid out the open office hours and the part where we'd stand here again in a month and show what changed because you spoke. When it ended, the chairs stayed warm. People didn't sprint for the door. They loitered and argued and picked up empanadas and asked Samir to explain windbreaks like they were poetry. Councilwoman Reyes shook my hand and said, "You didn't waste my time." In politics, that's nearly a Valentine. Andrew approached when the circles thinned. May we talk? He asked, careful. Here is good, I said, because I'm done with back rooms that pretend to be neutral. He nodded. You were good, he said, and meant formidable. Thank you, I said. Your partner's thread was lazy, a ghost of a smile. It was. You're on the short list, I added. If you win, don't build something I'll have to protest. The smile died. I'm not the villain, Clara. No, I said, kind. You're a man with a job. So am I. Ours just point in different directions now. He looked at Peter then, who had been close enough to intervene if necessary, and far enough to prove he trusted me to choose. They exchanged a professional nod with history underneath. I hope you win, Andrew said softly, surprising himself. Me too, I said. But not for the reasons you think. Outside, the evening had the ache of summer losing its patience. Hannah linked her arm through mine. You were a lighthouse, she said. Rays didn't blink once. We have edits, I said, high on the kind of exhaustion that tells you the day paid for itself. Shade, sound, storm drains. Don't make the pier behave. Samir held up the annotated sketch like a trophy. I drew a windbreak from a grandmother's sentence, he said. I love my job. May's phone buzzed again. She glanced, eyebrows up. Well, she said, that's interesting. What? Peter asked. The permitting office, she said. Our window just moved up. Again. How much? I asked. Adrenaline already waking up for overtime. 72 hours, May said. They'll hear early concept guidance Friday morning. If we don't have a preliminary package, we won't be in the room. Peter's jaw set a quiet, precise anger. Someone's playing clock games. Andrew? Hannah ventured. He shook his head. Not his style. He prefers chess, you can see. This is delicate sabotage. Then we sprint, I said. No panic, just pace. We lock the spine tonight. Tomorrow numbers and drawings and the town hall edits. Thursday rehearse. Friday we walk in. He won it. Peter looked at me the way people look at a horizon they've decided to trust. Can you do it? Yes, I said, without checking if I wanted to be smaller. We can. He nodded once. Then we build the thing that makes their clock irrelevant. A wind swept the parking lot, carrying the smell of salt and the sound of kids still playing somewhere too far to see. We stood there, 5 people with too little time and exactly enough will. From the doorway behind us, Andrew's voice, not loud, Clara. I turned. He hesitated, then, don't let them turn the word vision into a mirror. I won't, I said. We split into cars and plans and caffeine. Back at my place, Hannah taped the town hall notes to my wall like we were building a war room and a quilt at the same time. I opened the deck. I opened the brief. I opened the part of me that knows the difference between spectacle and a promise kept. At 2:13 a.m., I wrote the line that would become our spine. We are not selling the ocean. We are accepting the responsibility to be one more good neighbor on its street. I texted it to Peter. He responded with the typing bubble that kept stopping, starting, stopping. Then, that's it. Sleep. 4 hours. Then we make it sing. I put my head down on the table for exactly the amount of time it takes for a kettle to hiss. When I opened my eyes, the city was deciding between night and morning, and I had a sentence strong enough to stand up. By noon Thursday, the war room had a pulse. Edits from the town hall were on the wall like lanterns. Shade, sound, storm drains. Don't make the pier behave. Samir's model grew ribs and breath. May locked vendors and translators. Hannah rationed caffeine like a field medic with jokes. We rehearsed at 2/3 speed. Peter kept interrupting with the questions they wouldn't ask out loud. I tightened the answers until they could walk on their own. Numbers slotted into the story without apologizing. Capital expenditure, ADR, RevPAR, contingency for storms. The quarterly dashboard we'd publish in daylight. Belonging wasn't a slogan, it penciled. Then the email hit, permitting guidance, moved up again, Friday, 8 a.m., not 10. Someone wanted us winded at the starting line. Okay, Peter said, calm like a metronome. We land the deck by 7. Everyone home by 10. Sleep. We did not, of course, but we pretended convincingly. At midnight, I rewrote our opener to a single sentence you could say in a power outage. We're not privatizing a horizon. We're proving public beauty pays. At 7:41 a.m., the 5 of us stood outside the municipal building with a rolling case, coffee that fought back, and a model that still smelled like cedar. Councilwoman Reyes nodded when we entered. 2 commissioners stared like we were déjà vu. Andrew sat with his team across the aisle, civil, alert, a flicker of something like respect. I opened without slides. 3 beats, promise, proof, plan. Then Samir's cutaway, May's metrics, my pro forma that refused theatrics. I put the town hall edits on the table and said, "We changed this because they asked," and the room leaned in. A commissioner cleared his throat. "You're claiming premium outcomes with public access. Risk profile? Front-loaded," I said. "Compliance now, not lawsuits later. Community loyalty is cheaper than security. Resilience is not charity. It's cost control." Reyes watched me like a lighthouse measures weather. "And if revenue dips in shoulder season, we program community events," I answered. "Vendor mix flexes, pricing rides reputation. Scarcity is a party trick, trust is a moat." Silence, then notes, whispers, a long look at the model. The chair finally said, "Submit the preliminary in writing by noon. If staff concurs, you're in the formal window." Outside, the light was too clean to be merciful. Hannah squeezed my hand. Samir exhaled a laugh. May checked her phone and grinned. Luis texted, "Tell them the peer refuses to behave." Across the steps, Andrew lifted a hand in a small salute. Behind him, his partner typed something that smelled like spin. Peter looked at me. "You held the room," he said. "We held it," I corrected. His mouth tipped. "Then, let's finish the thing we promised." My phone buzzed unknown number again. "You're over the target. Expect noise." I typed back, "We brought earplugs." And a public. By noon, the staff memo landed. "Proceed to formal window." 3 lines, no adjectives. We read it like a benediction. Noise came anyway. A blog spliced a photo of me and Peter, with a headline that tried to make civic work look like gossip. May's text, "Ignore." Luis's text, "Peer still refuses to behave." Hannah's, "Hydrate or perish." We locked the deck one last time. Samir's model had that calm of things that know their purpose. May's dashboard breathed metrics that could live in daylight. I wrote our closer on a sticky note for my pocket, "Build prosperity that acts like a commons." The board session felt colder than the permitting room. Different light, sharper suits. A clock that scolded. We were third up. Andrew's team went first. Their deck gleamed. Views, glass, a lobby that wanted to be an airport. Premium, iconic, catalyst. The chair smiled the way you smile at a gift basket you didn't ask for. We rolled in our cedar and our sentences. I opened with the peer. Then the promise and the pro forma that didn't blush. Samir lifted the cutaway. May laid down the quarterly pledges. I named our niche and refused to apologize for it. We showed the town hall edits shade, sound, storm drains like stitches after surgery. Proof a cut had been made to heal. A member asked, "How will you keep public pathways from becoming afterthoughts?" "By permitting them first," I said. "By designing them last." Another, "If revenue softens, trust and programming," I answered. "Scarcity is marketing, belonging is retention." Reyes, "And if the ocean disagrees?" Samir, "It's in the drawings. Wind, salt, surge." We specified resilience before renderings. Silence, then the low murmur of minds adjusting. The chair leaned forward. "You're asking us to choose a philosophy." I nodded. "No. I'm asking you to choose a neighbor." We closed without flourish. Peter didn't rescue. He didn't need to. He stood like a keel. Outside, the sky had that blunt, beautiful blue that makes cameras lazy. Andrew caught my eye. "You were better than us," he said. "No theatrics, just weather." "Sometimes the room wants to be held," I replied. He glanced at his partner's glare, then back to me. "Take the win if it comes." "It'll be the city's," I said. We waited the way people wait for verdicts they've already built lives around. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Some of them just called it the first proposal that sounded like home. Hannah grinned, feral and kind. "Whatever happens," she said. "It heard you." Peter exhaled a laugh he hadn't budgeted. "One more hill," he said. I touched the sticky note in my pocket. "Let's climb it." The email arrived at 4:12 p.10 m. Subject line bureaucratic enough to hide a heartbeat. Determination, South Bay Coastal Resort. We read it in a circle, phones held like candles. Awarded, night group subject to conditions outlined herein. There were conditions, of course there should be. Shade ratios. Stormwater triggers. Vendor mix minimums. Quarterly dashboards in public. Everything we'd promised, now pinned to paper with teeth. No cheering at first. Just that quiet you get when relief and responsibility land on the same square. May smiled without pretending. We asked to be held to it, she said. Now we are. Samir hugged his model and then me, cedar dust and all. Hannah put her forehead to mine. I told you, she whispered, you were a lighthouse. Peter leaned against the window and looked like a man who had been arguing with gravity and finally negotiated terms. He met my eyes. A nod, a question, a shared answer. We walked to the pier at golden hour because some victories want a witness. Luis was there, of course, like he'd known without knowing. So, he said, grin loud. Are we behaving? Absolutely not, I said. We're building the room where the bay keeps being itself. News moved the way it moves, fast and sloppy, then slower and truer. A blog tried one more messy headline. It got swallowed by photos of the town hall board with edits in my handwriting and May's commitments underlined. Councilwoman Reyes posted a single sentence. Hold them to it. We will. It read like a benediction and a promise of supervision, my favorite combination. That night, under cafe lights strung like low constellations, our team sat on folding chairs on the boardwalk we'd soon replace. We didn't toast with champagne. We ate empanadas. We passed the memo around and let its edges get greasy with joy. Andrew found us at the rail. No entourage, no posture. Congratulations, he said, and meant it in a way that made my chest ache for something beautifully over. You were the neighbor. Thank you, I said. Build something good somewhere else. He laughed, then sobered. Don't let the quarterly reports eat the promises. We put the promises in the quarterly reports, I said. On purpose. He nodded. We shook hands like people who once loved the same future and found different maps. When the ribbon cutting came months later, we kept it small and honest. No confetti cannons. A fisherman's choir. A grandmother in a floral dress cut the ribbon with a pair of sturdy scissors and said, "Don't make the pier behave." And everyone clapped like a prayer. Kids ran. The wind did its old trick with veils. The boardwalk breathed. Shade fell the way it should. Vendors opened stalls with names that sounded like stories. The horizon stayed public, which is to say, it stayed right. I spoke for 2 minutes, because anything longer would have been vanity. We didn't sell the ocean, I said into a mic that didn't try to be a personality. We joined its street. If we miss what we promised, the dashboard will say so, and you will tell us. If we hit it, I hope you won't notice, because belonging should feel ordinary. Applause, warm and unhurried. Peter's eyes on me, steady. After, we stood by the rail again, the same rail where a different day had turned the key from the inside. Maybe it was fate, he said, not as a line this time, but as a private joke with the universe. Maybe, I said, or maybe we both finally stopped pretending the lines don't intersect. He held out his hand. Not a rescue. An invitation. Partnership. Has Winheim have not was wak howers. Partnership, I said and took it. We stayed till dusk pushed the bay into that indigo that forgives a lot. A kid jumped from the low ledge, squealed, surfaced, triumphant. His grandmother laughed. Somewhere behind us, a vendor rang up the day's last ice cream for a price a teenager could count out loud. The planks under our feet flexed and held. Work didn't get easier. We filed reports. We argued in rooms. We rewrote a clause because a storm taught us manners. But the horizon stayed unowned. The pier refused to behave. And in a life that had often tried to make me small, this place kept making room. On the way out, Hannah linked her arm through mine. You know, she said, for a city that loves drama, this ending is beautifully useful. That's the point, I said. We didn't build a story, we built a habit. She smirked. And maybe a little bit of a love story. Maybe, I allowed, smiling into the wind. Behind us, the boardwalk lights came on one by one, like a sentence finding its verbs. Ahead, the street waited with its ordinary miracles. We walked, not toward an ending, but toward maintenance of promises, of people, of a shoreline that keeps teaching you how to stay.